The Daily Wire editor-in-chief Ben Shapiro. He's also the host of the brand new Fox News special, the Ben Shapiro Election Special. And that premieres this Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 in the West. Ben, welcome back.
And thanks for having me.
So obviously there are not just senators on the Judiciary Committee eager to hear from Dr. Ford, but voters. Very curious to see how the court is going to shape up before they cast votes in the midterms. What do you make of these developments tonight?
You know, it's hard to tell where exactly this is going. All that it seems to me is that a lot of the requests that are being put forward by Ford seem kind of unreasonable. If, for example, we are hearing that Ford wants to testify after Kavanaugh, which makes no sense. I mean, you actually have to have the accuser testify before you can testify to rebut the accuser. You've never heard of a trial where the defendant actually testifies before the plaintiff. That doesn't make a lot of sense. We also don't know what the date is going to be on this thing. It seems to me that this is all delay tactic. I'll be very curious to see, obviously, whether it actually happens. Is it going to be private or is it going to be public? Republicans are being, it seems to me, quite forthcoming about allowing Ford basically whatever she wants in order to testify.
And her lawyers said as much in their letter. They said that they appreciate that the committee has been reasonable and accommodating to Dr. Ford's requests.
Yeah, and if the Republicans continue to be reasonable and accommodating and Ford simply doesn't testify, at that point you have to assume that a lot of this was a political ploy. Again, what's so frustrating about this is that I think good-hearted people on all sides of the aisle would like to know whether this is a lie or whether it's the truth or whether it's misremembering. Like, the guilt or innocence is what's the key issue here. But because of all of the political manipulation, primarily by Democrats, surrounding this particular issue, it's very difficult to get beyond the partisan hackery. It's difficult to get beyond the feeling that Democrats don't really care very much about establishing guilt or innocence in this case, that this is really just a club with which to beat Brett Kavanaugh and hopefully to win additional votes in the 2018 election.
Unfortunately, that's how part of this appears to be shaping up, because, you know, these are serious allegations with very serious ramifications. And what I'm curious about, and I know that you are, in fact, a lawyer, what do you think Republicans on the Senate Judiciary Committee should do as far as a lawyer potentially questioning Dr. Ford and, you know, maybe having a female defense attorney who can take her story apart a little bit?
I mean, that makes perfect sense to me. We had something similar with regard to Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to have a bunch of senators who don't know much about the case in the first place questioning. I mean, if she's not going to be allowed, normally in a court of law, you are allowed to face down your accuser. This ridiculous notion that you're never allowed to face down your accuser because of the shame of the accusation, this obviously would not hold in a criminal trial, which this effectively has now become. I mean, Brett Kavanaugh's life is either over or he's on the Supreme Court, right? One of two things is going to happen here. And that being the case, he's not allowed to face down his accuser. It seems to me that having somebody there who actually knows Brett Kavanaugh's story and can represent that story from his defense point of view would be smart politics by the Republicans as well as a just thing to do. Apparently, Ford doesn't want that, which makes perfect sense. You don't want to be asked hard questions, even if you're telling the truth. So it's a really ugly, sticky situation, and all of this could have been avoided if Dianne Feinstein had reported this stuff as soon as she heard it, and if she'd worked with Republicans to create an actual process here as opposed to everybody just catching as catch can.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, she also could have trusted the FBI a little bit more, because I think that's what Democrats have been claiming to want all along, is to reinstill confidence in these institutions. And the FBI would have kept all of this secret and perhaps maybe conducted their investigation a little bit differently. It doesn't really sound like that from their point of view, but I know that there are Democrats that are also questioning Senator Feinstein's motives here. And if I were Dr. Ford, I would be really upset about how all of this has played out, because this has really turned into a worst-case scenario for her as well.
It's a fiasco, and I think the most ironic thing about the fiasco is that, you remember, there was one Dianne Feinstein who was running for the Senate in 1992 after the Clarence Thomas hearings, and one of her key critiques of her fellow Democrats was that they handled the Anita Hill hearings wrong. They handled the Anita Hill hearings, by the way, almost exactly the way they're currently handling this, under the auspices of Dianne Feinstein. So it again looks like a political manipulation, which is really tragic, I think, for everybody, because, again, the vast majority of people across the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, really only care whether the accusation is true. They're not as interested in Democratic attempts to delay this beyond the election or use it as a cudgel to win votes.
Yeah, I don't understand. There's no physical evidence to gather right now. And from the people that we've heard who were supposedly also at the party, they've got no desire to corroborate or testify. So, and unless I've said this the last 3 nights, we've seen so many sexual harassment cases, and we've seen once one accuser comes forward, it either jostles the memories of past victims or they feel emboldened and not alone, and they come out and they basically establish a pattern. We have yet to see that for Brett Kavanaugh. And,
that's right.
If he did it, it's super gross and it's wrong and he can't deny it and he should answer for it. If he didn't do it, how does he clear his name?
That really is the question. We've seen no corroborating evidence. None. The first time this story was ever told to anybody who wasn't her husband was to a psychiatrist 30 years after the fact. We have no contemporaneous accounts. We have no actual evidence that anybody heard about it at the time. We have no actual evidence that anybody who witnessed an event was actually there or can corroborate her account of the events. We have no date. We have no time. We have no location. On the basis of that, we're supposed to say that this guy not only should lose his seat on the Supreme Court, but probably lose his career on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals on the basis of that?
Yeah, it's some brutal and harsh realities here that we're going to face head on next week. Ben Shapiro, thanks so much.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Good luck with your special.